In April 1989, my friend JJ invited me on a pilgrimage, and I had never heard of what a pilgrimage was at that point. And I made the pilgrimage with him, and he explained to me how to make a pilgrimage and what a pilgrimage was. And I thought then, and I think now, that a pilgrimage is a great custom, and the month of May is a great time of year to make a pilgrimage. It helps us to understand the nature of our faith. It helps us to recommit ourselves to our faith. It helps us also to understand, I think especially, how our faith is based on relationships. When we're baptized, we're introduced to a relationship. A new relationship is formed between us and Jesus Christ. And that relationship is eternal. It's a bond that's a real bond, even though it's spiritual. It's a real bond that has eternal consequences. And one of the things that Christ does to us is he introduces us to the love that God the Father has for us. He also introduces us to a friendship that we have with the Holy Spirit. And St. Paul reminds us that we're not just in this game dealing with human forces that we see in front of us. It's also, there are powers and principalities involved. There are angels and saints. Paul reminds us how the angels and the saints are looking down at us in our struggles, the way that fans in a stadium look at those who are playing on the field. And so the wonderful thing about baptism is that it makes us see, it helps us to see these relationships that are so important for us. And in the ancient world, before Christianity, whether it was the pagan world, who they would build their shrines to go visit their gods, or even within Judaism, they had their places to commemorate certain moments. For example, Jacob's well, certain moments when God intervened with the people or intervened with a specific person. They would go visit these places. And why would they visit these places? Well, they would go visit these places in order to call out, in order to remind themselves of an important historical moment. And so when we go to a pilgrimage, what do? The typical thing of a May pilgrimage is we go to a place where Mary is honored. We see that the first Christians already began to set out on pilgrimages in the early church. For example, there's a famous stone in the Vatican museums of a man around 160 or 170 AD who had gone from Greece to visit Rome, Albertius. And on his way home from Rome, he discovered that he was going to die. And so he had a tombstone made, you might say, or a marker made, in which he said, "I am Albertius, and I am returning from the pilgrimage that I made to visit the tomb of the fishermen." Right? So the first Christians would go visit, for example, the tomb of Peter. Also, the Christians would go visit, if they could, Jerusalem once freedom was granted to where they could more easily move about the empire, and for the reasons that they wanted to move about the empire. And they would go to Jerusalem. Well, given the vagaries of history and different circumstances and whatnot, right, it wasn't always possible for everybody to go to Jerusalem. And so the natural thing developed of local shrines. Local shrines were built to Mary, to the various saints of the places, and Christians developed this custom of making a pilgrimage to these shrines. And in May, we encourage people to make pilgrimages to a shrine, like the shrine whose website this video is on. But we encourage people to make to make pilgrimages to shrines. Why? Because a pilgrimage is it's yet another way of solidifying, renewing, growing in our Christian commitments. And so when we make a pilgrimage, what do? We take a half a day, or we take 3 hours. And the most basic material aspect of a pilgrimage is, when it's being done to the Blessed Virgin Mary, is that we say a part of the rosary while walking to the shrine. So if you drive to the shrine, maybe the last half an hour, you walk, saying a part of the rosary while walking. And then when we're at the shrine itself, we say a full part of the rosary, and then we say another part of the rosary going back from the shrine to wherever we came from. And that's the material thing of a May pilgrimage, a pilgrimage to Mary. I suppose there's other activities we could put within that basic outline, within that basic structure. But the more important, or perhaps along with that basic structure, there's also something that we're doing while making a pilgrimage, something that we do interiorly while making a pilgrimage. And again, when my friend JJ invited me on a pilgrimage when I was 18, he explained to me the 3 things we try to do on a pilgrimage. It's very good to make acts of reparation, or to express sorrow for one's past sins, for one's past faults, or even for just times in the past where we realized we could have been more generous with God, more loving of others, and failed to do so. The second thing we do on a pilgrimage is that we want to thank Mary, right? We want to make some prayer. We want to thank Mary, and even, you might say, promise Mary that we will try to grow in some way in our life after the pilgrimage, right? So the pilgrimage is meant to be a kind of beginning again. It's always good, you might say, we make a resolution, right, to improve our life in some way, to grow in a virtue, to be more dedicated to an act of piety, a regular act of piety, to adopt a greater spirit of service in how we go about things. And then the third part of a pilgrimage, which is we can ask for the prayer of petition. We can ask for something special. We can ask for something that we've been hoping for, a special grace for someone in our family, a special grace for ourselves. On that first pilgrimage that I made many years ago, my friend JJ explained to me that it's good to ask for something, right? And I did. I asked for something that I kind of asked that I would, by the end of the summer, I would see something or not. And as it turned out, I kind of forgot that I had asked it at the time. But by the end of the summer, the thing that I asked to see, I saw very clearly. So, and of course, you can see in those 3 things that I've just spoken about that this thing that I mentioned of relationships, right? How do we repair relationships? You ask for forgiveness. You examine how things are going. And you try to see, is there a way we can improve it? Another way to improve a relationship, of course, is to make a resolution, right? To say, yes, there's some concrete thing in my life, in this relationship, that I'm going to do differently, at least from my end. And then, of course, the third thing, of course, that part of relationships are giving gifts. It's not bad to ask for gifts, especially from those who love us. And so a pilgrimage, it can be a great personal thing that we do with a friend or with 2 or 3 people. It's also something we can do with a family. And maybe with the family, depending on the age of the children, the parameters could be a little bit different. But it's very important that part of a Christian life is that the Christian calendar, you might say, provides for us a lot of healthy routines, right? A lot of things which can help to connect us and keep us connected and help our bonds to grow with Jesus Christ, with the angels, with the saints. And so a May pilgrimage, or some people will do the 2 months we typically associate with Mary are May and October, right? But to have a kind of pilgrimages help us to have a kind of rhythm to the year, a rhythm of life, right? And a rhythm of, the seasons are like this, but then on top of the seasons, we also have these true parts of who we are, this true part of our history, these true parts of the relationships that we have with others that are also so important. So May is a great time to make a pilgrimage, and especially to a shrine to Mary, where Mary is given public veneration. It could be a church. It could be some shrine near a city that we live. It doesn't have to be at great expense. And of course, obviously, there are also special pilgrimages that people will make to actual places where Mary has appeared. That usually entails a little bit more effort, time, income, But we can all make a local pilgrimage every year as a way of renewing our faith, renewing the relationships and strengthening the relationships that we already have.